Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Juana Hernandez Urquiza. I am the CFNC State Representative for Spanish Services, and I want to welcome you all to the second CFNC Spanish Services webinar, Understanding the Financial Aid Process for Hispanic and Immigrant Families, Perspectives from a Public and Private Institution. During this webinar, participants will learn about the similarities and differences of the financial aid process from the lens of a public and private institution. Participants will also learn how they can better support Hispanic students and their families in completing the FAFSA application and how to support students who are DACA and undocumented explore financial aid options. Presenters will cover the most common mistakes that students make while completing the FAFSA and will provide common scenarios often seen by financial aid professionals when working with Hispanic students with FAFSA completion and verification. Lastly, presenters will share specific examples in processing financial aid information for students, including DACA and undocumented students. With me today is Kevin Michaelson, who is the director of the Financial Aid Office at Meredith College, located in Raleigh, and he has been doing this work for 12 years. Prior to that, Kevin worked at Hamilton College in New York as a Senior Associate Director of Financial Aid since 1997. Previous to Hamilton, Kevin served in both admissions and financial assistance at Trinity International University in Illinois. He has been an enrollment professional for over 27 years. He holds a bachelor's degree in business administration and economics with an emphasis on marketing from Trinity International University. We also have Diana Sanchez from Montgomery Community College. Diana Sanchez is originally from Mexico, where she completed La Preparatoria in Mexico before she migrated to the United States. Diana holds an associate's degree in arts from Montgomery Community College, a Bachelor of Science in Human Development and Family Studies from UNC Greensboro, and a Master of Arts in Professional Counseling from Liberty University. Diana has worked in different capacities at Montgomery Community College. She has served as a college liaison for the local high schools, worked in Student Services Department for over 6 years. She currently serves as a school or college counselor where she provides academic, career, and personal counseling to students. Diana is continuously strengthening her counseling skills in her work with students. She brings a wealth of knowledge pertaining to advising enrollment, registration, and planning program completion. Diana has been an advocate and just a liaison for financial aid and helping students in the community complete the FAFSA. She's done a lot of work with Donnie Hatcher on making sure that students are completing the FAFSA application. And I wanted to take a moment to briefly introduce Donnie Hatcher. Although she was not able to make the webinar, she did help put this PowerPoint together and has been working to make sure that we're able to provide this information to you all. So Donnie is a Director of Financial Aid at Montgomery Community College. And again, she was not able to make it, but we do want to take time to thank her for all of her hard work and helping with this PowerPoint. So now I would like to pass it on to Kevin Michaelson, who's going to be talking about financial aid in general, and also he will be talking about financial aid from a private institution perspective.
All right, thank you very much for allowing me to talk with you a little bit about what we do at Meredith and also talk about the whole process. So hopefully this will help everyone that's working with students that are in this situation. So I want to thank Juana for inviting me, and I appreciate the time that I have here to talk with you about that. So I wanted to first touch base a little bit about Meredith College. We are a private institution, of course. We have about a 13% Hispanic student population. We do offer institutional scholarships and need-based grants to undocumented, international, and DACA students. New this year, we have an impact scholarship worth $20,000 based on certain criteria. This GPA of 3.3, an ACT of 22, and an SAT of 1,100. We also have a partnership with the Golden Door organization. They offer scholarships to students that are DACA and also undocumented. They're loosely connected with Red Ventures, that's a company down in South Carolina. And we also have a transformative program called Strong Points. Our top major, you can see it listed there. Some things that you may not know, of course, we are an all-women's college for undergraduate programs, but we do also offer graduate programs for both men and women. So I just wanted to point that out and tell you a little bit about Meredith. All right, let's dive right in. We're going to kind of address some of these certain student populations in our presentation. We're going to talk about, of course, U.S. citizens and U.S. citizen parents, but also try to help you navigate those that are permanent residents and U.S. permanent resident parents. Also going to address the U.S. citizen with undocumented parents, and then talk a little bit more about the deferred action for childhood arrival or DACA students, those that also have undocumented parents. We're going to talk about those that are undocumented and undocumented parents as well as independent U.S. citizens and permanent residents and independent DACA students. So those are the populations that we're going to cover at great length in this presentation. Let me just dive right into our first topic. We really need to emphasize when talking with students that are in this situation to learn about their student citizenship status. And so it's real important for you to understand where they're coming from and what what happens after once you know about their status, what avenues they can go down in terms of looking for financial aid and that kind of thing. The first student status that we're going to mention is pretty straightforward, and it's pretty straightforward in terms of qualifying for aid, and that is students that are a U.S. citizen. The second group is a little bit more complicated because there's some real definitions that we have to look at, or you will have to look at to find out if they are eligible for any kind of aid. And these are what we would call eligible non-citizens. So we've tried to summarize them. I know that they're very granular and have some numbers associated with them, and you may or may not have these sorts of students on your campus or not, but just be aware that you'll have to research them a little further. And there's a document on slide, I think 24 or 25, that will give you more detail. It's called Details About Aid Eligible Non-Citizens. So I'm going to recommend that you go back and look at that. But let's just go through quickly. There are of course, students that are non-citizens, they are what we would call permanent residents with a permanent residency card. Those are eligible non-citizens. So eligible non-citizens that are conditionally permanent residents with a conditional green card, or an I-55-1C. Those that are a citizen of Republic of Palau and Republic of the Marshall Islands, as well as the Federated States of Micronesia, those are all considered eligible non-citizens. Those that have a arrival departure record, an I-9 form, which has these designations: refugee, asylum grantee, parolee, T visa holder, that's T1, T2, T3. And then there's the Cuban Haitian entrant. So if that's present on their I-9 form, they're likely could be classified as an eligible non-citizen. Also, those that are a victim of human trafficking, they have to have a valid certification or eligibility letter to show that they are in that category. Then there are those that are classified as battered immigrant or a qualified alien. Those are also ones that are classified as eligible non-citizens. There is the deferred action for childhood arrivals, the DACA program. Those wouldn't be classified as a eligible non-citizen. So we will talk further about what their avenues are, but they would not be classified as an eligible non-citizen. The same would be true for those that are students that are here that do not have the required documents to stay in the United States. So those wouldn't be eligible non-citizens. And then there are the foreign students, those students that have an F1 visa status. Those are also non-eligible students. All right, next slide, I want to give you just a kind of a bird's eye view of the three processes that occur while you're going through the admittance process and the aid process. These things are happening kind of coinciding at the same time. Of course, we have the admissions process over here on the left-hand side. It's pretty linear and pretty straightforward. You basically complete the application. You submit your test scores and your GP, your high school transcripts. Hopefully you're admitted, and then once you've decided on the school that you would like to attend, you make a deposit, and then you actually enroll. The process that's also going on at the same time, and it depends on which status or type of student that you are, you would go through the aid process. So if you're a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen, you would go down the one path that is shown on the slide there, and we're going to go into this at greater length. You go through the filing of the FAFSA and completing verification if necessary, and then eventually getting what we would call a listing of your aid called through an award letter. Coincidentally, also you have the other population of students that are also applying through their aid process on the other side of the slide here that shows that those that are looking to attend another college, they may have their own process, and they would fill out the college aid application, and then they would be notified of what they would be eligible for. And then another process that's happening while, or you should be participating in and completing is completing the search for private scholarships. And so you'll just need to navigate that process and make sure that you're on task with looking for those, because that's a significant source of possibility aid for a certain number of students. So I wanted to give you the bird's eye view. Now we're going to delve a little bit deeper into the aid process for U.S. citizens and eligible non-citizens. So that's what we have here. And again, I just want to reiterate that you'll be doing the admissions process first. We encourage you to do that because they can then pair up your FAFSA information once they have an admissions application. And one thing to remind you is that the CFNC has the free college application week, October 21st through the 25th. This is a really good time for you to complete your application. They won't charge you for the submissions of those applications to those schools that are participating that week. So encourage your students to get out there and complete that. All right, so if a student is a U.S. citizen and an eligible non-citizen, they will be able to complete the free application for federal student aid out at fafsa.ed.gov. You will need to use your 2018 tax information for the 2020-2021 academic year. You will need to have Social Security numbers, tax information, driver's license, some asset information in order to complete the actual form. To sign the form, you will need to have what we call an FSA ID. You can sign up for that while you're in the FAFSA, while you're completing it. But you also can sign the FAFSA's form as well via paper, especially for those parents that don't have a Social Security number. And we'll cover that a little bit later on as well. With the FAFSA, you can send that FAFSA information to 10 schools, up to 10 schools. So make sure you put the schools that you're interested in and you send that out to them. My recommendation is also to get out there and talk with or contact those other schools to find out if there's any additional processes that you have to complete in order to qualify for financial aid, and just be aware of. This third step that I have listed here, called verification, this isn't a requirement for everyone, but there are a number of students that fall into this category. And basically, the requirement for verification is it's a random process that the federal processor selects randomly 30% of the FAFSA filers to complete a secondary step to provide some additional details about their income. The big thing is, don't panic, and maybe encourage your students and parents not to panic. It is a very normal process. And it's not something like they're getting audited or anything like that. It is just a secondary step called verification. You will, or the student will, and the family will need to be required to provide some additional information. Often it is called a verification worksheet, or provide some copies of taxes or W-2 forms to the school that they're looking to get aid from. All right, so after you've completed the free application for federal student aid, maybe you've supplied the verification information, you would then be issued what we would call in financial aid called an award letter. This lists out all the different aid programs that you're eligible for from federal, state, and college sources. And so that's information that is provided to the student. You will get that from each of the colleges that you have sent your FAFSA to, and each of the colleges that you have been admitted to. So that's when the student will actually get a very good idea of what the bottom line cost will be for them to attend the college there. All right, let's dive a little bit in on a little bit more tips regarding FAFSA, especially to targeted populations. The tips for those that are U.S. citizens and that have U.S. citizen parents, there's not really an issue regarding documentation. You would just do a standard completion. For those that are U.S. permanent residents, students that are U.S. permanent residents, and those that have U.S. permanent resident parents, there really also isn't much of a difference there. They just would complete the FAFSA very much in a standard way. You might, or you would need to provide your permanent residency alien registration number on the FAFSA, and that would be early on in the FAFSA process. This is a little different for those that are U.S. citizen students but have undocumented parents. The advice is they can still complete the FAFSA form. That's not a problem because the student is a U.S. citizen. Here's some helpful tips. You need to make sure that when you're entering the parent social security number on the FAFSA application, that you enter all zeros in that area and that portion. If you don't enter anything, it will come back and it will be rejected. So you need to make sure that you enter all zeros on that. Please, if you don't put the zeros in there, don't use any kind of tax ID numbers that they may have used on tax forms for those that don't have social security numbers. So that sometimes is a common occurrence, and away from doing that. For those parents that can't be assigned an FSA ID, make sure you print out the signature page from the FAFSA form. You can do that, and you can mail that back into the FAFSA documenters, and they'll be able to process it without any problem. It may just take a little extra time, and that's fine. Again, I want to reiterate that you don't use the ITIN number. That's usually set aside just for tax preparation purposes. The other thing with those that are U.S. citizen, they would be charged in-state tuition rates in North Carolina, so that's definitely a benefit there. All right, so that's the FAFSA status tips for those populations of students. For those that are falling in the DACA students and that have undocumented parents, they would not necessarily be eligible for any federal or state funds, so they couldn't complete the FAFSA. There are some some agencies that require a FAFSA to be filed to verify some information, and so they may request it. So just complete the FAFSA if you are requested to do that. For the most part, the DACA students and undocumented students, they will be billed out of state tuition. And then we're going to cover a little bit more of a process for those students that are looking at maybe private schools or other schools that offer aid for their students that are in that category. For those that are looking at, say, a private institution or some other schools that offer college aid for DACA students or undocumented and foreign students, there generally is a process that they've set up for these type of students, and they will have their own process present to allow for aiding these type of students. So you will need to talk with each of those schools and find out what their requirements are. They may have a very similar sounding application or feel of a FAFSA form. At Meredith, we require a student to complete the foreign student application, and we use that to determine the eligibility that they may have for aid at Meredith. Some of these schools may also require some tax information to verify income that you've put on those forms. So please submit those as they ask for that information. All right, after you've submitted that information to the private institution or the other schools that offer this kind of a program, you will be notified of the eligibility in what we call a financial aid award letter, and that will give you a much better idea of what the bottom line cost will look like for these type of students. So everyone should be applying for private scholarships, getting out there and taking a look at different options that are out there. These two sites and information are out there that are free. Stay clear of any kind of requirement to make payment to obtain any of these scholarship searches. So go out to College Foundation of North Carolina. That's a great statewide resource for scholarships. But then another great resource is FastWeb. They have a great database of different scholarship options. Some advice about scholarship searches: make sure you're organized, make sure you make record of the name of the scholarship, the web links, the contact information, and the requirements and some of the due dates, so that you can be organized about getting the information to those different organizations. My recommendation is to look locally and statewide rather than nationally, because your chances are likely better at obtaining those local or statewide scholarships because of the pool of students are much smaller. Some also great advice is to have a resume prepared so that you can send that off quickly to those organizations that require information about your background and high school career. And then make sure you really hone your essay that will kind of tell your story and tell why you're in need of financial assistance. So that can be really helpful when applying for those different scholarships or outside private scholarships. So here are some other helpful tips for options in paying out of pocket, just some things beyond looking for financial aid, some things that you may not think about, but I want to at least highlight, is that many of the schools that students are attending do offer some kind of payment plan. So you can spread your cost over the course of the year. And so that might be something that can help in managing the cost for the students. Something to consider is that living at home can be an option and can be a great savings for attending school. So I want to make sure that they even consider that, as well as if you'll want to try to maximize the amount of college credit that you can earn while you're attending high school, so that you can take advantage of spending the least amount of time at college, so that you don't have to pay as much. The other thing is that I want to make sure that an option can be for attending part-time. It may take a little longer, but it's something that will be less costly maybe over time, and you can maybe pay that over time with your budget. In terms of cost, really focus on one semester at a time instead of getting overwhelmed with the whole year or the whole 4 years, but just focus on the first semester and then work towards that goal and try to pool your resources. So I want to encourage you, make sure you're asking your relatives, your employers and friends to see if they can help out, and just try to look under every bush that you can. Make sure that when you do receive any kind of help from outside, make sure you thank those that help you, and make sure you're keeping them updated on your progress, because they might be willing to continue and help you in the future. We have a few questions I can try to ask here or answer. Right, so let me read a few of these questions. So what documents do students provide to demonstrate these different types of statuses? Student citizenship statuses slide. All right. So many of them are listed in that slide, but the document on slide 24 and 25 will actually list out at the bottom. There's 5 different listings that you'll be able to view what documents are required. So I recommend you going out to that document it's going to be at the 24th or 25th slide of this presentation. You can get some real detail information about the citizenship status. We have another question here. Can DACA students attend state colleges? So those that are DACA students, they can attend state colleges as long as they meet the admissions requirements, of course. But they will need to make sure they might not they likely won't qualify for any of the federal state aid, but the different state colleges might have some eligibility for some of the scholarships that they offer individually. So I have another listing here. One more question here is I've interacted with students who are U.S. citizens with undocumented parents who are wary of filling out the FAFSA. I think their concerns are that they might inadvertently expose their parents' undocumented status to the authority. How do you recommend I respond to these students? Should they be wary of the financial aid application process, or are these concerns unsupported? I have not yet heard of any kind of occurrences where a undocumented parent has been reported to the authorities, and there is no way of knowing or connecting those two together. I hope that wouldn't occur. I don't know for a fact, but I have yet to hear of that connection ever occurring when they've completed the FAFSA form. So I believe that they very much keep the information private and secure, and that's what they want to do. So I have not yet heard of any kind of thing like that, and I think that's unsubstantiated. It may be just rumor and conjecture. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn over the presentation now to Diana, and here she is.
Thank you, Kevin. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Juana, for, I think, let me know if you guys are seeing my screen or not. I'm monitoring the chat box. My name is Diana Sanchez, and I am with Montgomery Community College. I work mostly with the student services during the admissions and registration, and I work closely with Donnie Hatcher, the Director of Financial Aid at Montgomery. A little bit about our perspective and how we handle students with different or non-standard status. Montgomery Community College is part of the community college system. We're a public institution. What we do is typically partner with county schools, our high schools in the county, and we tend to get the perspectives of Spanish-speaking leaders. Our leaders could be any teachers who are close to the community or are involved in the community, any church members, we work sometimes with the cooperative extension as well, and we partner to do like workshops and meetings out there in the community. Our population student population for Montgomery is around 10%. It could be less, it could be more depending on the semester. And we offer different CTE programs and 4 transfer programs as some other community colleges. We try to be culturally aware of some of the political situations, and maybe as the community feels, we try to listen to what community leaders or Hispanic community leaders said to us. I guess because we're a small rural area, we all kind of talk outside of normal hours. So we try to be sensitive about those topics. We do a lot of research, reach out a lot to some of the MA-led colleges such as Durham Tech. And if Durham is here, thank you. I have learned a lot. And we try to connect. Again, we try to have those conversations with the Hispanic leaders out there in the community. And now we're sharing some of the information, and we love to share any information with any four-year schools or any of our partners community college institutions out there. One thing before I go on the next slide is to remind everyone that the ITIN numbers typically start with 9, the number 9. One issue we have seen with some of our students is that the high school students who is in front of the computer at the high school filling out these FAFSAs typically is not aware of the number listed on their parents' tax information, and they assume it's a Social Security number. So we try to communicate and repeat so many times to them, if your parent or the tax information on your parent starts with a 9, please go home, talk to your parents, and ask them if this is a valid Social Security number. Because if it's not, then we will have, if you put it in there and submit it like that, you're going to have to make corrections. And that, it's a long process to fix. Another thing that I wanted to add, as Kevin mentioned, there are different forms or documents that students have to present to when trying to provide the documents that are needed to show, what is it, the non-eligibility. I think somebody was asking how do I, or what kind of forms do I require these students to present. Some of our students have a notice of action from the Immigration Homeland Security, and the letter, typically the notice of action is the number I-797, I think. Our admissions office requires them to present that letter because we could have a clearer, we could have an idea of the forms and the status. Sometimes the students don't know what is this F1, T1, and all that. So we require them to present that letter. And actually, we have to have a copy of the card. If they are DACA students or any other visa, F1, F2, we require them to provide us a copy. So that way we have the, for record purposes, we have the matching visa that they put in on the system and what they're presenting. All right, next. Oh, how do I go to my next slide? Bear with me a minute here. Oh, got it. All right. So on recapping similarities and differences between four-year schools versus two-year schools, we, as a two-year institution, all students applying who are non-standard FAFSA applicants, we know that it depends on what kind of category this student falls in. For example, the permanent resident students with permanent resident parents, they do receive federal, state, institutional funds. However, the DACA students or undocumented students, they are not eligible to receive federal or state funds. What we rely on is on institutional funds, and these are local funds that we use to help not only DACA or undocumented students, but those students who are non-eligible for financial aid, even though they're U.S. citizens. Also, we use business sponsorships, and this is the Montgomery Scholar. That's the institutional fund that we use to help students who are non-eligible, not only for DACA or undocumented, but also for students who are not eligible for federal or state scholarships. So some of the strategies that we use at MCC, again, we try to work closely with the high school staff. We have, through the every fall semester, offer workshops. And some of these workshops that we go by, it's through the Juntas program, which is, I think, or has been in another colleges that we have learned that they work with different institutions in the county. So we have come up with different leaders in the county with the high school students and the college to provide workshops to help students and their families understand the different classifications and the documentations that they need to be preparing for, to apply to college. We typically do it in the fall, during this time, fall semester, towards the middle of the fall, to get them ready for the following fall. Another thing that our school has done is we have early college students now on campus. What some of our public information staff has asked some of these students to put short videos. They're not lengthy, they're like a minute or two. And the students have created those videos on their own words, and they have put in different scenarios, and just in their own words, they create these videos, and we posted them on their email board, and just for them to be aware of the importance of filling out FAFSA early. Also, Donnie Hatcher coordinates the flyers and postcards, and we keep bombarding them. Basically, that's the word I use with Donnie. You just keep sending them stuff so they are aware of the FAFSA application deadlines. Again, college bound presentations at the high schools, at the college, and we have done it, I think, before in the North Carolina Cooperative Extension here in the county. So they could be a good resource for you guys. All right, so another strategy, especially with the question, I think somebody asked, how do I answer the question on someone who is a U.S. citizen and the parent who is undocumented, and being afraid of putting that information out there? That fear is going to be there all the time with the parents. Even myself, I'm Hispanic. I was born in Mexico, came in here in the middle of my high school, at the end of my high school years. I tend to forget to ask or to be sensitive about it. So don't feel bad about that if you keep treating everybody on the standards. So I try to remind myself to let the student know that we work with the educational system, and we are working with FAFSA, and I explain what FAFSA is, and then I explain what the college system is. And then I said, yes, I mean, we can't guarantee the information is not going to be out there, but this is mainly for you to obtain funds, for you to be able to, how can I say it in an easier way, for you to attend school. if your parents are willing to talk to me, then I set up a meeting and then I explain to the parents the same thing. Some parents make the decision of they opt to not put in anything on the system, and some parents are willing, after you explain how that all of these works and connects, they're willing to do it. I have had this situation not only with Hispanic or DACA students, but I have also had my regular U.S. citizen and U.S. citizen parents and students being hesitant about applying for FAFSA. Relationships are a must. Relationship with the student and with parents, depending on how much are you willing to explain. And I know it is time consuming when you are on the season of applying. Therefore, we use the workshops to get a big amount of people or audience so they can start sharing that information on the community or with the peers that are graduating in the senior class or the recent graduates. Some students are not going to be willing to tell you that their parents are undocumented. It takes a while before they hear all the information that they're going to come to you individually and say, well, my parents are undocumented, and they're afraid to put in their information on the system. Because, again, the fear of deportation is always there. So just be sensitive about it. Kind of helps a little bit in getting the information that you need to put on the records. And also understanding that the parents' lack of knowledge of how the U.S. Higher education system works. It takes a couple semesters before the parents kind of understand how this works. The language barrier first, and then the system, education system being different from where the original country. Have or encourage students to talk to their parents. They don't have to make a decision when they're coming into your office and they try to sit down and do the application. Show them the page. That's what I typically do. And I said, you're going to have a conversation with your parents about this information. Doing anything that you have not talked to your parents. So a lot of my students who are hesitant about putting all that information on FAFSA, they come in once or twice and then asking, once they feel comfortable, they come in with their parents and complete the FAFSA. Some students don't return, whether I wish I can give you an answer why they don't come back, but some of them do not apply for FAFSA. However, I found out later that they're enrolled, that they're paying out of pocket. So it is a conversation that starts before they get into the FAFSA application. And encourage, if you know that some of the students are applying, encourage them to take college credit classes, like the Korean College Promise program that we offer through the community college system. Or the early college courses or the middle college. I'm not sure. Some of our community college partners offer all these programs. And also encourage them to explore scholarships outside of their FAFSA. There are tons of companies or private institutions or companies that offer scholarships for these students who are not eligible for FAFSA. All right, so we are going into the frequently asked questions, and this is a series of questions that have been sent to Juana at CFNC. And so I'm probably Juana and Kevin, if you can hear me, I would probably hear some of your point of view here on how do I answer these questions. Okay.
Yes, I'll chime in and just if you want to go through those frequently asked questions and scenarios, I'll help out or if they add anything that's needed.
Okay. So let me start with this. If my parents are undocumented, but I was born in the U.S., can I apply for financial aid? So standard answer, yes. The student is a U.S. citizen and the parents are undocumented. As long as all the necessary documents are provided to the financial aid file, and be aware that more than likely the application will be flagged for verification. And depending on how you handle that on your individual school, you will have to just give the heads up to the student. Be aware that you might be needing the, especially if they don't transfer, use the transfer tool on the FAFSA, they will be more than likely required to provide an IRS transcript. And that's typically the case here. If the parents are not undocumented and they're able to transfer, then rarely they are asked for the transcript. As long as they are providing those documents and any other documents on the verification process, they might be good to go with financial aid funds. The next question, what financial aid options are available for DACA or undocumented immigrant students who are not eligible for federal or state aid? So I'm not really sure on the four-year schools. Kevin, you may chime in here, but on the two-year schools, we have, we work with the employer sponsor waiver. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of that, but it's not the student who receives the in-state tuition. If they choose to go with this process, it is the employer who is receiving the in-state tuition. Therefore, some of the employers are willing to pay or cover the tuition costs for these students. We also provide the local funds who are not state funded. For example, our Montgomery Scholars, this is a local fund that, that the college raises money from different sources. And not only to help the DACA or undocumented students, but again, any student who is non-eligible, and they could be U.S. citizens with U.S. citizen parents. And maybe outside of scholarships, we received links and often receiving scholarship invitations, and I just encourage or forward the students who disclose who are DACA or undocumented, and I forward it to them if they're willing to apply, and if they're willing to go through the process and they get some funds, then we work with those students through the financial aid department or our business office. And there are some other resources. I'm not really familiar with it, but I have heard from some other students that sometimes the WIOA program system, I'm not really familiar with their processes, but no, there are some resources there. Kevin?
I'm sorry, Diana. Yes, I'll add a little bit about the private colleges. It will depend on each college and what they have to offer. Some of them have a separate application or process for filing for aid for these type of students. I know at Meredith we have a separate application they complete, and we are able to provide some resources from our own college funds and some other funds with some endowments that we have as well linked to these students. So it will depend. You will need to be in touch with the private colleges that offer this kind of program, and just know that they have likely a separate process.
Right. So, okay. Thank you. I'm trying to run here, Juana. I know I'm short with time. So, if a parent does not file taxes, does that affect the student's eligibility for financial aid? In general, anyone who works has a tax to be filed, right? So this one, it depends on the individual situation with your students. Just like any other U.S. citizen student with U.S. citizen parents, when they are saying that their parents don't work or they don't work, typically they fill out some documents that requires them to determine if they're required to provide any type of form from IRS. So we do the same thing with the DACA students. If they're saying parents don't work, well, they have to provide documentation that from IRS or any other source that is listed on the IRS publication 17, which is you guys are if you're in the financial aid department, you probably have that brochure or paperwork or are familiar with it. Then there are a list of options there. It depends how your financial aid department does or files the forms needed to prove or make the student complete the financial aid file. Again, I always run to Donnie Hatcher, my financial aid director, to ask her about the forms, and then she provides this paperwork to the students, and then the student has the responsibility to provide the documents needed. The next question, my parents filed taxes but were asked to amend their tax returns during verifications due to incorrect filing status. What should I do? At MCC, I try to catch these students before they submit their financial aid application. And I said, typically I have this conversation with students, therefore the workshops and the meetings with financial aid and high school counselors, because students are not aware of, at least the Hispanic group that I work with, are not aware what their parents' filing status is. Some of them are filing as head of household, and then mom and dad, we have seen cases where mom and dad file different individual tax information as head of household when they are married or living together. So typically when we do our workshops, we tend to catch those things, and we explain the family that they have to make a decision. They either make the correction with their accountant and then come back and do the FAFSA, or they can submit the FAFSA, then go ahead and do the correction, and then make the corrections with FAFSA and follow up with our financial aid department to make sure all the information complies with the financial aid application. There have been parents who choose not to do the amendment, and there have been other parents who choose not to do the application. And there have been students who do the application, do the amendment, and then it takes them almost 4 months or 6 months to complete the whole process. And these students typically put in a down or a payment plan on the tuition while their financial aid application is at work or it's completed. Could be 3 months, could be 6 months, could be until the next year. Again, the workshops, the informational workshops, at the high school and at the college, I think that's our main objective, to catch all of these students before they get in the middle of the application and find themselves thinking they don't have a problem, and then there are issues, and then they end up not enrolling or not coming because lack of funds.
Right. I would really reiterate anyone considering filing the head of household that they maybe have a double check with financial aid department and either contact a financial aid at the college that they're looking at to make sure that they've filed correctly and have that completed or have that knowledge before filing the FAFSA form. That will just help out the whole process, I think. That it's really the head of household. That's the most confusing part of filing the FAFSA with that status. So if you are listed as head of household on your taxes, I would go back and look at that and maybe have someone in the FAFSA or on the financial aid staff take a look at that and make sure that that was the correct decision to make there. Okay.
The next question, is there a difference between DACA and undocumented students when it comes to financial aid? Yes. Sometimes the DACA students are required to submit the application knowingly that their application will be automatically denied because they're not eligible for state or federal funds. But they are in need of this denial confirmation page so they can proceed with the next scholarship. So yes, I have DACA students who come in and complete their application and they print out their confirmation page and then they continue on the next steps for the other scholarships. Now the undocumented student might be eligible for some non-state or federal funds, and they are in need, or their scholarships require them to complete a FAFSA application. So we have only had one case at MCC before, and my director of financial aid, Donnie Hatcher, had to sit down and meet with our local funds director so they can come in and arrange documentations needed, because the undocumented student had no valid social security number, so she was not able to complete the FAFSA. So again, it is how you will be handling this locally. And at MCC, we are small enough that we can sit down on a table and figure things out, making sure we are going by what the rule says, and then making sure we can provide as much assistance as we can to the student without going outside of the rules. Again, we have only had one case, and the director of financial aid and the director of the local funds were able to arrange a form, and then hopefully this form will be the standard for any other student who comes in that situation. Next question. What is the difference between the financial aid process at a private institution and a public institution, particularly for DACA undocumented students? From a two-year school public perspective, and based on what we have seen at Montgomery, we have seen that a lot of DACA students have even more financial aid opportunities with private institutions. No, I'm not sending them to you, Kevin, but I am trying to get as much information as I can when I have a student who is ineligible for financial aid, and give them this information so they can make the best decision on what is the best school for them and what is the best option for them once they have earned all the credits they needed if they're looking to transfer. Or if they're high school students and they're looking to come in as a new student at MCC, sometimes they do all the paperwork with us, and they get local funds or some of local funds to assist them with the tuition, and then at the last minute they get a 4-year ride in a private institution, so they said goodbye to us. So, which I'm happy for, but that is a student and family's decision.
I mean, I'm very much a supporter of FIT. So, you know, of as much as we'd like all the students to come to us, we also support that a good fit is there, and depending on the programs that they're looking at. So, you know, there are some opportunities that may be greater at private institutions, but you also have to look at FIT.
Right. Thank you. All right, so if I am a U.S. citizen living with a family member because my parents are living outside of the U.S., how should I file my FAFSA? Is my parent information still required? So it's, we, as Donnie Hatcher always recommends, she said, she parts from what would I do with someone who is a U.S. citizen. So if the parent is living outside or somewhere outside of the state, then the student should be filing a standard FAFSA. However, if the parent has not worked or lived in the U.S., then the student should answer the question, would you provide parental information in the FAFSA application as no? And then the FAFSA will be automatically rejected, that's what she has mentioned. And the individual college will follow up with that student individual situation. This could be those students that are U.S. citizens and are homeless or classified as special circumstances, and those could be a long list coming through social services. Sometimes the high school counselors have these letters. Forget me, I can't remember the name that Donnie calls them. And if there's no documentation from the high school counselors or the Social Security services, then there is a meeting that the staff had, and they make like a professional judgment on the circumstances that that student has. In this case, if the student is a U.S. citizen and the parents are undocumented and they're not living with him or her in North Carolina, whether they're living in another state or in another country, then they have to look at the individual case to determine if the student is homeless or an unaccompanied youth. Sorry for my pronunciation. The next is just a list of resources that we shared and typically go back, and we have it as a reference for questions with non-eligible citizens. And because the more that you dig, the more that you ask, the more that you look at the individual situation, you'll have to compare and see where the student and their family falls for you to follow up with documentation and follow up with what your individual school requires on file.
Diana, I just want to add, I know that we had a question about eligible non-citizens and getting the documents required for that, and that last one, the bottom that says details about 8 eligible non-citizen, that is a government site that has great information about you know, what documents are required and what documents you can receive that proves the eligibility of these non-citizens. So I recommend that it's a very dense document, but it's very helpful to get right to the nitty-gritty of what's required and what can prove their aid eligibility. And they even have pictures of the different documents that are that they could view.
Right, and you're referring to the AA, tips for undocumented students.
The last one, I'm sorry, the last one, it says details about aid eligible non-citizens.
Okay. Okay.
That one has some real good information in there.
So I believe at this point we're going to take questions. Juana, I'm not sure if you're listening. Have I answered the questions? Do I have any on the chat box that I have not answered? Or Kevin?
Yes. So one of the questions that came in, Diana, was do you have any tips I can pass along to ineligible non-citizen students to help them secure a business sponsorship?
Secure a business. Basically, what we do at Montgomery, we have a form that the student has to take to their employers. And typically the student comes with the employer's information already. They have already arranged a contract between them. So it's not something that we help them arrange. We ask them if they meet the requirements for sponsorship, which I'm not sure if all the schools follow similar requirements. All I know is that it had to be licensed or a registered business, I think in the state of North Carolina. I typically refer students to the Latino coalitions because they often work with companies that sponsor students under DACA. They are the ones more resourceful on how they help students to try to get the sponsorship with the businesses. So we don't work directly with the businesses or do any other arrangements besides the tuition payment.
Thank you, Diana. And I just want to remind everyone that we will be having a webinar on November 12th that's going to focus on the North Carolina exemptions for community colleges. And so the presenter will be going into more details on the business sponsorship so that you all will have more information. Another question that came in was, what are the speakers' topics to your campus community? So whenever you were talking about the different strategies, you may have already talked about the topics, but somebody asked about the topics that they bring or that you all bring to whenever you're partnering with schools.
What we do, going with the topics when we do partnerships, because we have the early college in-house now, and we will have them as neighbors on our backyard next year, hopefully. We tend to work together. It's typically because our leaders and the county schools leaders work together, is that we have had those opportunities to work with them. Typically what we do is recruitment, and in some of the recruitment workshops or information sessions, we throw in the different programs that we offer, and then we throw in the individual sessions. We depend a lot on the high school counselors because they are the ones who provide us with the dates and sites, and they are the ones who work with the students and send these announcements to their parents so they can attend the workshops. I would like to say, yeah, I'm doing it, but really I am very dependent on the support on the counselors and some of the teachers because sometimes this is initiated by the teachers who are working closely with the undocumented, DACA, or Hispanic students, and also other students who are non-Hispanic but are also with visas or different non-citizen status. So I would say partnership with your county schools, your high school counselors or teachers would be the best support for individual schools to provide these workshops and start doing information sessions at least once per year.
Thank you, Deanna. Can you please forward onto the next slide?
Okay.
We have 5 minutes left, and I'm not seeing any other questions pertaining to this particular webinar. But if anyone does have any questions, we encourage you to add them here, and then we'll try to get to them. But I, again, want to thank everyone for attending. There will be a survey that will be emailed after this session, and so we do want to encourage everyone to please complete the survey. Your input and your thoughts are very important. It's going to help us improve. It's going to help us understand what information you're needing, so that we can provide the information that to help you better assist the populations that you're working with and your communities. The recordings will be available soon. We're still working on providing the webinar recording from the first webinar, and they will be posted under the resources videos hopefully within 2 weeks. You all will receive notification whenever those webinars are ready and posted on the website. Remind everyone of our upcoming webinars that we have. The next webinar will be October 28th at 3:30. It will be focused on residency determination with a focus on working with Hispanic immigrant populations. On November 12th, we have policies and opportunities for Latino-Latina students in various non-U.S. statuses at North Carolina community colleges. This is the webinar that I mentioned that we were going to be talking about the exemptions, and we'll be covering business sponsorship. On November 26th, we will have representatives from Wake Tech Community College to talk about North Carolina Community College's career training and higher ed options for all students. And it's just going to talk about opportunities or pathways that students that from various immigrant statuses, what opportunities they can pursue that may be affordable to them. And then lastly, we'll end with a webinar on December 11th named Si Se Puede, Building Trust and Relationships. And I don't see any questions coming in at the moment. I do want to take time to thank Kevin and Diana for providing all this amazing information, great information on how to better support students and as they're navigating financial aid process.